All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our fourth in a series of webinars for Headed Back to School for students with special education services. Tonight's webinar is Creating the Just Right Distance Learning Environment. It is sponsored by the Department of Special Education, Family Support Center, and Programs and Services, and we're glad that you're joining us. As always, we'd like to thank our Prince George's County Board of Education for all of their support in all of our activities. So a little bit about the agenda. We're going to do some welcome and introductions. So we'll start with that. First up is Dorothea Copeland.
Hi, I'm Dorothea Copeland. I'm the Occupational Therapy Instructional Specialist for the school district. Good evening.
And then Dr. Beth Jayate.
Hi, good evening. I am the Instructional Specialist for Family Engagement.
And then Ms. Yvette Young.
Good evening, everyone. I'm the social worker with the Family Engagement Program in the Family Support Center.
And I'll introduce myself. I'm Marcy Torchen. I'm also with the Family Support Center. And a big special thank you to Jennifer Holloway, who's helping us with the presentation and the WebEx this evening. So we're going to give you a quick orientation to WebEx. We're going to give you an update on some breakout sessions, give you the session outcomes, and then we're going to move right into the meat of the presentation, creating that just right space for distance learning. So we're going to set the stage a little bit, talk about some social, emotional, and behavioral considerations, some self-regulation, and some physical considerations. So if you looked at the flyer for the registration, you'll notice that we had advertised some breakout sessions. Due to the volume of our attendees in both this morning and this evening's sessions, we have decided to move those breakout sessions to next week. So if you have specific questions pertaining to a specific program or a related service or programs and services, this is the schedule for next week, and we will place a registration form in the chat. And someone just did that for you guys. It's a link to register for those sessions for next week. So Monday, August 31st, students with social emotional transition considerations. Wednesday, September 2nd will be the infants and toddlers program and special education preschool program. Thursday, September 3rd will be autism, regional CRI, and related services. And we'll repeat this slide at the end and repeat the link for registration throughout the presentation. So some special thanks to folks who helped us create this presentation for tonight, this workshop. Heather Kafele is one of our speech therapy instructional specialists. Dr. Jocelyn Newell is a physical therapy instructional specialist. And then Maya Green, Peggy Hare, and Lori Monroe, who are occupational therapists. So this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted publicly on our YouTube channel. We have American Sign Language available. One of our panelists, Ashley Drumright, is translating in American Sign Language. And we also have Spanish translation available, and here are the directions in English and Spanish for that translation. And Wilbur is going to give those instructions in Spanish.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Buenas tardes a todos. Si usted desea escuchar el programa en español, por favor puede escucharlo marcando al número de teléfono 508-924-1900. Otra vez, 508-924-1900. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Wilbur. All right, we know that we're going to try to get to most of your questions tonight, but we know with the volume of participants, we likely will not be able to. That's part of the purpose for those breakout sessions next week. And so we'd like you to utilize the chat function for your questions. We will also get a printout at the end of the night of those chats and be able to more efficiently address those in writing. So if the chat function is along the bottom of your WebEx interface, and it looks like a little thought bubble. And you will also see throughout the presentation some of those chat bubbles on the PowerPoint slides. All right, so we're getting started. We want to create a session that's interactive, informative, and engaging for you as parents. So some WebEx norms: be present, minimize distractions. We're going to have several polls across the presentation that you'll see a thought bubble on those slides. And whoever is facilitating those slides will let you know that you can actively participate in those polls. Some of them will require you to choose an answer. Some of them will require you just to put a message in the chat. And so we'll use the chat feature to ask those questions and share feedback. And the first of those polls will happen now. And you should be seeing the poll in the right section of your WebEx. Give you about a minute more to answer. All right, we're going to wrap up the poll. So if you're in the poll right now, quickly hit submit. All right, so we see that most of you who are attending tonight are parents. That's great. We want you to know that the information that is shared here tonight is intended to benefit all students, but specifically students with special learning needs. We're not intentionally endorsing any specific products during the presentation. We are sharing ideas for you to make your own decisions about those materials and the devices that might be helpful to your student. All right, next slide. And
So our session today provides tips for creating a just right environment. And this is an environment that your child will participate in during distance learning. When we think about participation, this is something that happens when there is a link between what your child needs to do in an environment that aligns with his or her core abilities and attributes. So let's think of it this way with a few examples. If your child with a learning disability is motivated to learn and is presented with instructional activities that are appropriately challenging, but he's working in a room that's too hot or disorganized, then he might not fully participate in the instruction. The physical environment is not ideal for learning. Let's think of another example. If your child has difficulty attending, but responds to verbal praise when she stays on task, the lessons may be effectively presented based on her learning needs. But if she is not giving praise or recognized for her effort, she may not fully engage. In this example, the social environment does not support her participation. Remember the power of creating the just right workspace. This physical and social emotional space is as individualized and as unique as your child and your family unit. Let's take a few minutes just to talk a little more about this environment that we just talked a little bit about. The environment involves both the physical area and the social atmosphere that is created for your child. Quite honestly, this is the element that you probably have the most direct impact and influence. The physical environment includes that place that you will set up for your child to participate in virtual school. This space may be full of sensory stimulation. Perhaps it's a soft chair. It could be next to the kitchen where you're preparing a meal. It might be by the window or under the vent. It is a sensory experience, that physical environment. Where you select the workspace will affect how your child may be able to best attend and complete activities. It might be a small area with household objects nearby, or it could be a real large area that could be shared. The social environment is made of those intangible characteristics that influence how your child might feel about him or herself, or how they may feel about others. You also have influence on this environment. How will you give feedback in a way that builds your child's confidence? How will you give them wait time so they can process information before expressing what they know? How might you encourage them to ask for help only when it's needed and decline that help when they don't? Designing the just right physical and social environments will be the focus of our presentation today. Many parents have expressed concerns about how their children will stay focused and complete distance learning activities. We've heard that several times throughout the presentations that we've made. There really are many reasons why students might be challenged with this. However, research has shown that environmental modifications can help to increase active engagement and decrease challenging behaviors. So we're going to have a poll at this time. You can see that yellow chat bubble. Every time you see that, think about how you're going to participate and how we're going to ask you to engage. We have a poll that will include several questions. You'll see that again in your right side of your screen, and we'll take a few minutes as you complete those. Your participation, even in this part of the presentation, will give us good information that we can hopefully help to tailor some of our conversation tonight and also think about topics in the future. Have you created a designated space for distance learning? Will your child be using a shared space? What are your major concerns about creating a space for at-home learning? And then the last question is pretty generic. What is something you want to know about today? What is something that we could either, again, discuss or be able to follow up with you today? So we'll take a few minutes as we see the majority of the participants have completed the poll, then we'll move on, but we will take time so that you can finish.
we're going to give about another minute for the poll.
We're going to switch just a little bit, but you'll see it's still in the same thing here. We're going to talk about a childhood fairy tale, but we're going to give it new meaning. The fairy tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears is actually a reference for our discussion today. As the fairy tale goes, once upon a time, Goldilocks strolled through the woods, came upon a house, and knocked on the door. When no one answered, she entered and began to explore. She discovered several items that obviously belonged to the furry residents. She tested the 3 bowls of porridge, the chairs in 3 sizes, and the beds with 3 degrees of firmness, soft, medium, and hard. When she found the best food temperature, the best chair size, and the best mattress to her liking, she exclaimed, that's just right. Goldilocks realized that there really is no one size that fits all. And today we apply the story of Goldilocks to distance learning. We define the just right distance learning environment as the best available conditions in your living space for your child to engage in distance learning. So here's another time to interact with just a few words. Look at that picture of this family. It looks like, I would assume, a dad and son. It could be an uncle and nephew, but it's 2 people that are engaging in what looks to be distance learning. How does this photo compare to your reality with distance learning? So look at it, see what thoughts come to your mind, and then just type in a few words in the chat box. How does this photo compare to your reality with distance learning? Okay, I see some comments. It's spot on, it's relatable. There may be different adults in the home besides this one, very similar. Yeah, some of you experienced something just like this last year. So as you continue to share, as you choose to, let's again revisit this point that there is no one size that fits all when it comes to creating a workspace for students. Just like each child is unique, each family is also unique. Family routines, resources, values, and experience really do vary from family to family. While we can offer you suggestions about how to design your child's workspace for distance learning, ultimately, you will decide what works best for you and your child and your family. This session really is intended to just offer a few things to consider as you create a workspace and an overall learning environment that fits the unique needs of your child and also your family unit.
So as we start to consider that just right, unique learning space for your child, It's important to acknowledge that each child has their own strengths, needs, and preferences. With that consideration, it's very important for you to work with your child to design that just right learning space. And on this slide and the next couple of slides, we have a couple of thought questions that you and your child can consider when you're designing your learning space. You will also be provided a link with a preference assessment that we've created, a series of questions that you and your child can explore together to look at what they prefer or what would help them in their space. So some considerations you might ask is, does your child prefer an item to be close by while they're learning? Do they prefer you to be within eyesight or at a distance? What about certain clothes? Would they prefer to have certain clothes with certain fabrics or textures? Would that make life easier for them? Some things are going to be helpful and other things are not going to be helpful depending upon that individual student. So you might ask yourself, do certain scents, colors, or images help my child to improve their learning experience and their mood? Or does your child benefit from decorations in their area or an environment? But for other children, that would be a distraction. So maybe you want to minimize those decorations in the area or cutouts. Is a clock being visible? Is that helpful and reassuring so that they can keep track of the time? But for other kids, that might create some anxiety and make them anxious as they keep watching the clock. Some additional considerations that you might ask is your child an active one? Or do they like sitting still for long periods of time? Some children like quiet spaces, while others might like soft music to help them keep engaged in the background, playing in the background while they work and learn. Some students might like colors or exciting superheroes or animals in their workspace. And others might need a lot of options close by for writing utensils so that they can make choices on how to create their work. Some students might like a less crowded space so that they have space to walk around or move around. Others might like a little bit more seclusion and feel more secure if there was a door that they could keep ajar. We have a link here, how to create an at-home learning space, which provides even more information on how you can customize the learning space. It's a very good extra information. So it's very important to be intentional about creating an emotionally safe learning environment for your student. You want to make sure that you're taking time to celebrate successes, keeping the learning experience positive as much as possible, but don't worry about mistakes. It's normal and natural for students to make mistakes, and they learn from making mistakes. So you want to reflect an environment that it's okay to have an error, encourage them to gain more information, a better understanding, and to keep up their effort. Success means taking risks, and so you want to help them to stay informed versus getting every answer right. You want to help your child make sure that they're addressing their needs and providing feedback as much as possible. You also want to give positive feedback that is attuned to your students' academic needs. We can't emphasize enough how much positive feedback makes a really big difference for helping your students stay encouraged. So here are a few simple examples of strategies that might help support your student as they approach this new distance learning year. Some students might benefit from a list of to-dos, as you can see clipped to a board or something near their screen or in their work area to help keep them on track. Some students might benefit from positive affirmations in their work area to help them to stay positive. Some might need a fidget to help them stay calm during stressful times. Later on, we're going to talk more about lists that are important to keep in that workspace area so that students don't have to forage around looking for this password or that piece of information, that everything is at their fingertips so that they're ready to stay engaged and in their learning experience. So another aspect of keeping an emotionally and socially safe and learning environment is to check in with your student and their emotions. So we have a couple of varieties of emotional check-in charts. This is something that you can download online to help you and your child stay informed of where they are. As you can notice, we have positive emotions as well as more challenging ones. You could customize this. You do not have to use a prescribed chart. You can create your own if you and your child are creative like that. You can see there are color-coded visuals or facial expressions that help your child communicate how they're feeling. And the chart helps some students who have a little bit more trouble communicating their emotions. The goal is to help your child recognize pleasant and positive feelings and intervene early when some negative feelings start to emerge. This is another kind of emotional check-in that you might use with a particular student. This one has the 5-point rating scale that's very commonly used so that a student can express a numerical feeling rating, or they can use the emojis to express how they're feeling. As you can see, this chart comes with not only how they feel, but what they can do about that feeling. And again, we're reflecting both positive and challenging emotions, but you can personalize the colors. You don't have to use these colors. You don't have to use these emojis. You can create something that's totally personal to your student. For older students and tech-savvy students, there are a lot of free apps that they can download on their phones. There are free meditation and calm breathing apps, positive affirmation apps that can support these students in independent self-management. So let me touch back over positive praise. It's very important to provide positive feedback to your student to help them appreciate and know that you recognize what they're doing well. And you need to do that as close as possible to them displaying their that desired behavior, that behavior that you want to see. So when you're providing that positive feedback, it's very important to make sure that it's specific. So I have a couple of examples here. You might say something like, wow, I noticed that you took your time to complete your math problems. I noticed that you used your calm breathing strategies when the work was challenging or frustrated. I'm proud of you for persisting with writing your sentences or completing your science assignment, even though the work was super challenging. Excited that you asked for a break instead of having your emotions become overwhelming. So remember, whatever you praise, that's what you'll get more of. Remember, all behavior has consequences, both positive and inappropriate. So try your hardest to keep noticing and acknowledging their positive efforts. And we all need a little motivation sometimes to keep ourselves motivated and engaged in work, and students do too. We recommend that you start with identifying small incentives that are meaningful to your child. Remember, in order for an incentive to work, it has to be meaningful to that child. So You want to plan in advance. What are they going to work for? Develop a list of small rewards that they can access on a break or as they complete a task, and then work up to some bigger rewards or incentives over time. So they might be working for game time or time outside that's appropriately socially distanced. Some kids might want to work for some art time or talk time with friends. As a student, have access to preferred activities, incidents of negative behavior or emotional displays should lessen. Some students might need a very simple communication style to help them keep engaged and with their work. Though when you hear them becoming emotional or they start complaining, a simple way to address this would students who need a simpler form of communication is the first then model. So you would say first work, then reward, or first work and then their incentive. You would also want to ask them to restate what they're working for. So it's in rehearsing, they're rehearsing themselves. Oh, what am I working for? And if I keep working, then I get to engage in something that's fun and meaningful to me. Make sure that whatever you promise, you deliver as closely as possible to their completing their expected task. So another thing that you could do is create choice boxes for breaks. Every program, every student's program will come with breaks, and students it's vitally important for them to have some choice built into their day. That way, they feel that they have some investment in their school day. So what you could do is create a simple file box, having one preferred break activity on each card. And then when it's break time, that student can go select an idea out of the file box to do during their break time. Some students might need a timer or a prompt to help keep them on track for their break time so they know that it's time limited. You could give them a verbal prompt so that as time passes, they can prepare for the transition when break time is over. Or you can set up a couple of timers. So one might be the warning timer, and then the other might be the final timer or alarm to say break time is over and that it's time to get back to work.
All right, now we're going to talk about defining and designating the workspace. And some of this information we know is very generic, but we want you to remember to help your kids keep the area clutter-free, have all the supplies that are necessary readily available, limit background noise as this can potentially distract the teacher as well as your child's peers. Ensure that the furniture is an appropriate fit for your child. Make sure there's good lighting, a comfortable temperature in the room, and that there's space available for movement breaks. When you're talking about defining the space, I know when I read the chat, a lot of people are saying that it's going to be a shared space. You may have to share this space with your child, or they may have to share the space with siblings. So there are some ideas about how you can designate space. One idea is this dividable panel. I can't even remember what it's called, but the picture you see in the top right-hand corner, the folding divider, room divider. And then below, this family had multiple children that were all sharing the same space, but they identified the space by specific colors and using little dividers in between the desk spaces to give students a designated area. Right now, we're going to take a few minutes to look at a video, a very short video, about 2 minutes or so, about how to prepare your child's workspace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Kauscher, and I'm Title I Specialist for Walnut Elementary School. I wanted to share with you some tips and tricks on distance learning and how to help your child succeed as we kick off this school year. Just as we as parents have packed up backpacks the night before school, prepped lunches, and made sure those textbooks and those pencil boxes have made it into their backpacks, you'll be doing the same, but from home. I want you to think about 3 areas to support your child in distance learning: workspace, technology, and tools. For workspace, it's important to be mindful of where your child is located in your home. Is it in a high traffic area? Is it a quiet space where they can work distraction-free? Make sure that the workspace also has enough space where they can have their technology device, but also be able to work alongside that device. Just wanted to show you a glimpse of my workspace. You can see that I have my laptop set up. It's directly connected to a power source behind me. You can see that my space is located close to a wall. Therefore, people can't cross behind me as I'm learning. I also have my extra scratch paper right here and my caddy in front of me, and I have my headphones handy. For technology, it's important to make sure that their workspace is close to a power outlet, as they'll be charging their device throughout the day. Also have headphones handy in case they're in a high traffic area or they need some help kind of eliminating any outside distraction. Another tip would be bookmarking any key sites their teacher shares with you at the kickoff of the school year. That way they don't have to type it in, they just click on that button on their bookmark strip and it takes them right to the desired website. Having a list with their passwords will also help them get in and out of different resources quickly and without interruption. When it comes to tools, have a resource like a caddy or a couple cups with sharpened pencils, pens, scrap paper, so your child can take notes while they're learning and write down any questions that they may have for their teacher. I hope that these tips come in handy, and I hope that your child feels nothing but success as we kick off this year with distance learning.
Oh, gosh. Another way that you can use a common household item to create an identified space for your child is to create a study carrel. And the one that you see here was created out of a cardboard box. And you can use this as a visual if you have a child who is easily distracted and they may be working in the same space as their sibling. There are some other unique things that you can do to help define a space for your child. On the right-hand side, you'll see a picture where one family used a closet to create a learning space for their child. On the bottom picture, you'll see where a family created a floating desk where their child can do their schoolwork. Create things such as a floating desk, and there are a lot of them out there that are do it yourself, and then there are some that are commercial that even fold back up into like a little cabinet after your child is finished. Another thing you should do when defining your space is consider a way to differentiate that space from school time and playtime. Even though those spaces may be utilized for both, some suggestions might be when the ceiling light is on, it's a school time area. When the desk light is on, it's time for play or your break.
So you were able to see in that video and in some of Beth's slides the benefits of reducing clutter. And having a cluttered workspace means that a student will likely become more distracted and maybe less inclined to focus on instruction. When the things they need can't be found, or what they don't need can be found, let's think about that toy or their cell phone or the game controller, all of those things around them for a virtual lesson, their accessibility for learning is limited. So like the slides and video we looked at earlier, reducing distractions can be as simple as removing that clutter, looking at those cardboard boxes to cut up to create that study carrel. It doesn't have to be a full out clean up the room and all of those things. We just want to make sure there's a barrier, whether it be physical or, kind of separated off to the side of the room where the student has the things they need, but doesn't have the things they don't need. So one of the things we've seen folks do is take common household items and create storage cases or where workspace materials can be organized. So if you have some empty cups or boxes or baskets, you automatically have a way to store the materials that are needed. We use lots of Ziploc bags in my house, and they're also a good way to keep material organized in a way that can be quickly found. They're really great for using dry erase markers on so that you can label things and then erase it and use it again. And in talking about dry erase markers, you don't have to have a fancy whiteboard for those calendars or those schedules. A mirror can substitute as a dry erase marker to post checklists and a calendar. You want to be sure to include, and Dorothy is going to talk about this a little later, movement activities in your daily schedule, those brain breaks. Allowing your child to participate in creating their own schedule will encourage them to take ownership of that process by helping you plan the day. Have a consistent time for starting and ending that school day. And Yvette talked a little bit earlier about those rewards or that motivation. You can mark it with a song or a timer or an alarm or a special activity or a small reward. You can put together a calendar or a daily schedule. A lot of our teachers are going to be using Google Classroom. And so that automatically links to the calendar that's in your child's Google email for PGCPS email. That can be printed and taped to the side of the box or taped to the desk if it needs to be, with assignments and all of those kind of things. One thing I really like is that there is an infinite number of timers online. You can use online stopwatch apps, timers on your phone, or oven timers to keep track of during breaks and while working. All you have to do is Google digital timer and it will come up. They have ones that are specific times. They have ones that you can set for specific times. Just making sure how long your child stays on task or even how much time for a scheduled break. So reducing noise, you want to make sure that you're turning off all cell phone sounds, turning off the television, limiting background conversations. The studies have found that reducing noise increases the ability to focus by almost 50%. And in addition, it decreases stress levels. So if you have your students that are bothered by specific sounds or specific movements or things like that, reducing those background noise can help them focus on the virtual lessons. Students who are specifically sensitive to noise can wear earphones to block out those noises that might lead to those feelings of discomfort or distress, even if they're not listening to anything necessarily virtually online. I know that I'm definitely a visual learner. We don't want you to clutter the walls, but oftentimes it helps to use visual supports like checklists or anchor charts, like the one up on the slide that says character traits or discussion web. They can help a child answer questions, expand ideas, be a visual reference. You could take them around the workspace, and your teachers can give you ideas about which visual resources work the best.
Thanks, Marcy, for going over that helpful information about visual supports. And from Beth, we learned about how to define that space. We want to talk a little bit now about seating options, about positioning, a little bit also about movement breaks. And so when you look at this picture, we're not asking you to give us a shout out or respond this time, but when you look at it, what's wrong with this picture? He has great posture from all the way up to we get to his shoulders, and then he has that real forward neck. And so as a related service provider, that's one of the things that I would be concerned about. How do we create seating and positioning that helps him to have, and for all students, your student, to have the best way of using your child using their body to get their work done. And so when we look here, the neck is forward, his shoulders aren't supported. And so this would be a student that we would want to look at, how can we do something different to support him? So this is the ideal seating position. This is straight textbook, and it's very seldom that you're going to see an ergonomically designed desk and chair in someone's home. Probably not even so much in the schools, but it does give us a great visual of what we would be working towards. And so we would be looking that the feet are flat. If we look at this student here, we could actually look at her and get the same information. Her feet are flat, her knees are bent at about 90 degrees, her hips are in a good position, and her elbow, if you look at it, is just about where her waist is. Her head is right in the middle. This is a good, just right position if we're looking at supports. One person wondered about a place in the bedroom for a workspace. This actually was this young child's workspace, and her mom was helping her to designate your work time is during these hours. She used a visual for that, and then your playtime can be a different, but it is important to designate a spot just for work. If we look at the next picture of the same girl, she's in a different place in the house. It may not be totally ideal when it comes to the furniture size. Her elbow now is almost up as high as her shoulder, which tells us that table's a little bit high. But this may be the just right position for this family because it's in the dining room where her mom may be preparing meals or her dad may be preparing meals. So even though the furniture may not be textbook ideal, it works for this family. And so we would say this could be just right for her. Screen height is another consideration because students are going to be in their laptops, maybe even a desktop or other devices. It's important that the eyes are straight ahead and that they're right at the top of the screen. This helps to reduce eye strain. Also, this person's head is right in the middle and he's looking straight ahead. This is the ideal position for the screen height. This is one, we also have the bubble, but just think about it. You don't have to respond by the bubble, but would you say this is too high, too low, or is it just right? Let's move on and see. It's actually a little bit too low. You can see that her eyes, if she were looking straight, they would be well over that screen. And so here, it's a little bit low than ideal. And so part of our presentation tonight, and Beth is going to now transition us and tell us about some of these household items that you may commonly have in your arm's reach.
So I wanted you to take a look at some of these common household items and think of ways that you may potentially be able to use them with your students during distance learning. We'll share some of the ways that we thought about using them, but also in your chat. Can you share some ways, some creative things that you have used at home to support your children? And I'll just share a couple of these. One, the cookie sheet. Oftentimes you can use this if your student is working on sight words or the alphabet. You can use this with magnetic letters that you can purchase from the dollar store. And the cookie sheet can serve as a way for them to create words. Next slide. Some of these I actually learned of this morning when we did the session, but one, a parent shared that they save their bubble wrap so that their child can use it when they're experiencing anxiety, and it helps to calm them down. And another great idea that a parent shared today was the garment rack. And I never thought about the garment rack, but she said she purchased a garment rack, and then she used a shower curtain, and she placed the shower curtain on the rack, and that created a backdrop for her child. And so she also shared that her child is really excited every morning when they get to go and roll out their background for distance learning. And with the shower curtain, these are things that, you know, you could change pretty frequently if they are just things that you have lying around the house. And not only could you use a shower curtain, but you could use a regular curtain that you may no longer be using at home and cover the garment rack, and your child will instantly have a backdrop that serves as also a divider if you have another child who is participating in distance learning in that same space. Does anyone have any common household items that they use and tips that they'd like to share with other parents? If so, please drop them in chat and we will send them out to everyone to take a look at.
So Beth said they were using paper cups and Amazon shipment boxes to create their space.
Thanks for sharing that.
Here are a couple of workplace hacks. And again, using your chat box, we'll just take maybe 15, 20 seconds, because this is, as soon as you see it, then type it in. What are some of the workspace hacks that you see on these 3 photos? Okay, let's move on and let's see if you had them in your mind. Okay, those 3 hacks then. One of them was a stack of books. This can be an instant way to elevate the laptop so it's in the just right position. You could also use multiple books or even a box. This is another time to think about going to your grocery store or maybe going someplace that you can access some cardboard boxes. It's a great way to put on your table. It can be a standing table. If it's the right height, then one of your children or your child could stand to do their work. A loose leaf notebook. Here we see that it's a great foot stand for a foot support for a student. Some chairs are just not going to be the just right height. And so you can actually use this loose leaf notebook so that they have the best support. And when their feet are supported well, then it actually helps their back. And these are all hacks that you may use also as parents working from home. A loose leaf notebook also, and we don't have a picture of this, but it could be a great slant board also, where some students need just a little bit of height as they're writing. You can use a notebook so that they can rest their arm and hand while they're writing on a piece of paper. And then the large binder clip, that's a perfect way to keep papers that are just right in terms of the height for looking from the screen to the paper. It could be a great way to also put your schedule or your affirmations, but a binder clip goes a long way also if you're looking at customizing your workspace for your child. Here we talked about a standing table. They can be expensive if you look on Amazon, but here's one that can happen right in your home. This, again, is a little girl who was using her bookshelf as a great standing table. It was a perfect height. And you can see on the picture on the right what that height would look like. We still want it to be in a height that the child will be able to rest their elbows at a comfortable position, just slightly bent. And so these are some ways that some children are not going to find it comfortable or as engaging if they sit the entire school day. Even though there are breaks that are built into the schedule, some students naturally are wigglers. I call them wigglers. And those wigglers sometimes have a hard time staying in their seat. So you could offer them the position of standing. For many students, when they stand, they are less active, or they can still be somewhat active, but still engaged in the lesson. This is another alternative position that is actually okay. It can be great for some students. For some of our students who may have low muscle tone or need some strengthening in their upper body, or even for those wigglers, when they lay on their stomach, they have this instant pressure or sense of stability in their whole body. As they prop on their elbows, they're actually getting great strengthening in their upper backs, and that sometimes helps with their posture and their endurance. So offer this also to your child. If they say, I want to lay down on the floor or go outside on a mat, maybe to do my reading lesson, that from at least a postural standpoint, that could be okay for them. So this can also be a great alternative to sitting. Let's talk a little bit about lighting. This is an area we don't often hear a lot about. We think often of the seat or the visual supports, but lighting is just as an important consideration for your workspace. And there's several research studies that have been done about the best lighting. Generally, we know that lighting, if it's appropriate, it can reduce off-task behavior, and it can play a role in the student's achievement. Lighting is something that's very individualized. There are some children, because of their disability, they're very sensitive to lighting. And so what may be a comfortable level of brightness for one child may tend to be distressing to another. And so this is really where it's important to get your child's feedback. Maybe sitting by the window is great for one child, but it can, again, be almost a distraction, or for some students, almost painful to have certain types of lighting in their eyes. And so there are several options. This is one, again, to play around with your child to get their feedback and notice when they seem to perform best depending on the lighting. Everybody needs a movement break. And this is why science teachers shouldn't be given playground duty, because this teacher looks like he sees the children as a pendulum versus them being on a swing during recess. So we're going to talk about what are some more, I would say, safe and appropriate ways to have movement breaks. And so we do know that students with special learning needs can get easily tired. They can be frustrated very quickly when they're learning new information. Learning takes brain power. It takes energy. It takes focus. It is a challenge sometimes to keep that focus. And so brain breaks really are a way to help the child to refocus. In some ways, it's counterintuitive, because you think, they're not paying attention, they're not focused. It's not always intuitive to say, let's take a break. But this really is helpful for many students is to get up, to move, to do a gross motor movement. Some teachers you will find will embed these movement breaks. Others will allow students to have their own structured movement breaks. But this really is important. We also know that movement increases blood flow to the brain, and that can help increase attention. We also know that exercise reduces stress and anxiety. And when you have reduced stress and anxiety, you actually have better attention and focus. It's hard to be stressed and in a distressful state and be able to learn at the same time. So offer movement breaks. When you have access to the PowerPoint, you will find that there are links here that give some real good ideas. And then I'm going to also share some ideas at this point as well. So breaks can be fun, and it can be generated by the child. Part of the childhood experience is play and having fun. And so these are some movement breaks that can be used: dancing to a song, you could take a walk, having snack together. Some children, because of their disability, may not be able to engage in walking or dancing, but they can still make silly faces. Whatever moves and whatever is fun and gives them satisfaction is a good way to take a break before you go back to engaging in the learning experience. And so, like we heard from the video, these may be ideas that you could have on a card, and when your child needs that break, you don't even have to think about it. They can select what they want, and then they can engage in that quick break, but it can be something that actually is very helpful for their attention. And so today we've shared resources with you that helps you to create that just right learning environment, that environment where the conditions work best for your family and your child in order for your child to engage in distance learning. Sometimes it may take a little bit of trial and error, but you know your child, and part of your experience as a parent of a child who's in distance learning will be analyzing, reflecting on what works, and also including them in the decisions that are made about their workspace. They can be your primary source of knowing what will work for them. And so we hope that this information that we shared was helpful. We also have some additional resources now that Beth will talk to us about, or Marcy will share with us.
Thanks, Dorothea. So you saw the video earlier, tips and tricks for distance learning. We've also included tips and tricks for keeping up with students' work during distance learning, and tips and tricks for break times during distance learning. All of those have some additional suggestions for folks that need some help with setting up things for distance learning. As the others have been speaking in the chat, I've also placed links to our materials folder where you will be able to find those check-in emotion charts. We will also post the final PowerPoint presentation there that will have all of these links in the presentation. And I have also posted a couple times our Family Support Center YouTube channel, which not only has our recorded videos from this distance learning series, but also a series of videos from our virtual conference series in the spring, which some of those have more specific targets of more specific disabilities. So check it out if you get the chance. And we'll talk a little about our Family Support Center. So you've heard from Dr. Jade and Yvette Young today. She is new to our office. She is a new position as social worker. So she's been helping us a lot provide information on community resources and social emotional learning. Dr. Jade is there with me as well. And we also have Cointa Velarde, who is our parent outreach liaison. And her telephone is there as well for English or Spanish. So a little bit about our services. We help with understanding the IEP process. We have disability-specific workshops. We attend fairs and conferences that the school district provides. We can assist you in preparing for your child's annual review. We also have assistance with understanding how to resolve disagreements. And like I mentioned earlier, referral to community resources. Once we get back in the building, we also have a lending library and a small computer lab. So please contact us. Our email addresses are on the slides, as well as our phone numbers where we can be reached even during distance learning. We're open from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. And again, I want to remind you of that parent Q&A session that they're happening next week. Monday, the social emotional and transition considerations. Wednesday, infants and toddlers special education preschool program. And Thursday is autism, regional CRI, and related services. So along in the chat, they have also posted a link to register for those sessions next week. And we will be sending out the links to those on Monday so that you have the session links for those. All right, and just a big thank you to our presenters, Dorothea, Ms. Young, and Dr. Jayate. And that is it for our meeting this afternoon. We are taking a look. We were not able to grab all of the questions in the chat, but we are downloading them and will provide answers. So we didn't ignore you, I promise. So thank you very much for attending, and there will be an exit survey that pops up. And again, if you need us through the Family Support Center, if you have any specific questions, please don't hesitate to contact us.